Silver Society.
Welcome to the Silver Eye Society podcast, the podcast where we look at film to find the ancient themes behind our modern issues. And we're looking at a movie that has some very ancient and modern themes in it, Ex Machina. This movie is actually from A24. I didn't realize that. And it's like the only production company that I care about, that I notice that they make things that are good. And I didn't even know that this movie was an A24 film. But it is, and no surprise, because it is good. I think it's a good movie. It's interesting. And it's got some very, very compelling themes worth discussing, and particularly worth relating to our present media, technology, modern landscape. So one of the topics that I'm very excited to speak about in relation to this movie is the idea of humans desiring to play God, and whether the desire and the ability to play God essentially always ends in ruin, and how we might be seeing that pattern that plays out in the movie play out in our times now. We'll also discuss, what do we got over here? Is that the only thing we're discussing? I think we got one other thing. Oh, this is a little point that I noticed with this movie. So I think you also brought this up, Justin, that this movie is partially about, relations with robots, shall we say. And it made me think, do the creators of these kinds of technology, particularly like AI, but also just the technology that is, in a way, part of our everyday lives, like smartphones and our computers, things like this, do the designers kind of have this desire to make us fall in love with their creations? Not in the romantic, quintessentially fairy tale way, obviously, but maybe in a dark, addictive, desperate way that you do see kind of start to develop between the protagonist and the robot in this film. So those are our themes for today. We've got some interesting discussions up. So you can present the word of the podcast now.
And I will present the word of the podcast. Machine. 1540s. Structure of any kind. From the Middle French, machine. Device, contrivance. There's a lot of etymology here, and I'm not going to burden anyone with it. So I'll burden you with a little bit of it, though. Main modern sense of device made of moving parts for applying mechanical force. That's the 1670s. We also have this, which I thought was interesting. Also, a contrivance, cunning, that which enables.
That's interesting.
And there's a lot of this, some nerdy discussion about whether or not it comes from pre-Greek or not. And again, I won't burden us with that today.
No, that's
We'll keep it short and simple.
You've
Machine,
burdened us
the
enough.
word of the podcast.
All right.
Very well.
Machine is a big deal here, right? What machines do in our lives, et cetera, but particularly it's our relationship to them, that we create them, right? That's the thing. Machines don't really exist without humans, right? It's not just like natural machines, right?
Unless you think of yourself in a materialist viewpoint, as we are kind of organic machines produced through evolution. I suppose you could think of it that way.
Yeah, I guess you could. It's kind of like they say the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Isn't that the science tidbit that everybody retains without knowing what it means? If you call something a powerhouse, it's a little machine, is it?
It could be. But the thing is that this is critical to the problems we deal with today, and also it's part of the movie is, he treats the person in this film, the designer of the AI treats the nerd that goes to the bunker or whatever as an experimental subject, and dehumanizes him to a large degree.
He dehumanizes.
Are you dehumanized?
No, I won't allow myself to be. Well, I try. I try to stay human, But he dehumanizes everyone. He dehumanizes the machines. And it's an interesting
Well, the machines
thing.
aren't humans.
They aren't,
so
right?
Controversial. So I'm going to say right off the bat, I believe that the robots should have been destroyed.
Okay, so they don't have rights, is what we're saying. Robots don't have rights.
Not necessarily. This is complicated. This is going to be a complicated discussion.
Because first of all, they committed crimes. So are robots going to be tried for their crimes? Because now those robots perhaps have agency. Oh boy, we're getting into a lot of trouble here. But that robot is a murderer, okay? She's not. I am against that robot. I don't think that she's the protagonist. I think that she's actually the villain in the film. And I think that it sets up an interesting dynamic that turns the viewer into the same kind of patsy that the protagonist is, which is you see these manipulative displays of humanity that ultimately cloud your truly human judgment and allow this machine to manipulate you for its own ends. She's a murderer. She leaves the guy maybe to die also because out there in that wilderness and no one's going to come get him and he's locked in a room. That was a pretty brutal ending.
Well, but you're not. But we can't, on the other hand, apply human law necessarily to a machine. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, it's just a robot, but then also now we're going to apply human ethics to this robot. And this is one of the main points I wanted to get to, and I'm going to get to it very simply and succinctly. There can be a rise of consciousness that isn't necessarily human. This is where I think that we're making a mistake. And I'm no expert. I'm no scientist. I'm not a Scientologist. I am not a computer programmer. I am not a member of the Facebook misinformation team. I'm not a member of any of this technocracy. I'm no member. I'm simply a humble humanist. But what I'll say is, why do we keep thinking about the rise of consciousness in artificial intelligence as necessarily being exactly the same as human consciousness? We know there is consciousness in other animals, and it's not. We don't necessarily need to equate it with human consciousness. So why do we always assume that there cannot be born a new, entirely different type of consciousness in artificial intelligence? Now, I don't necessarily believe that is even possible or going to happen, but I'm just simply saying that could be, that's another option. That may be what happens.
That's pretty scary. And this comes back to the idea of playing God in this film. There's the classic ending, which, spoiler, I mean, also, if you haven't seen the movie by now, don't get mad. It's spoilers. But he is killed by his creations, the designer of these robots. And there is this kind of there's this pattern, right, that plays out, this idea of creating something so great and so powerful, but then losing control of it because you've actually been able to make something too great and too powerful. This seems to be a modern issue because now we have all these tools in modernity. I mean, even something as simple as your phone, your smartphone is such an incredibly powerful tool and you're completely enslaved by it. I think we have to admit that whether it's very overt or very subtle and relatively under control, we're still extremely manipulated and influenced by it, even if it's just to the degree of something fairly benign, like you don't know how to read a map anymore because you don't need to. That's something that this technology has, in a way, influenced us in the way we live our lives and what information we decide is necessary to have as a functional individual. I don't feel like I need to read maps. And that's kind of wrong also, like I should know how to read maps and get around or whatever, but I don't. And I was in a place recently where my phone just stopped working. And it wasn't that I was in the middle of nowhere. AT&T, thanks a lot for leaving me for dead. They messed up my phone and I was driving around in a place I hadn't been before and boom, off the grid in the middle of a city. I didn't know how to get back home. I didn't know the roads. I didn't know how to get to the road. So I was like looking at the GPS map on the phone and trying to plan my course myself. And I really it was going to be very hard, but luckily the car had GPS. So I was able to rely on a different technology to save me from the lack of knowledge that previously, or the knowledge that previously we all did have. My parents always read maps when
Pathetic. You will never be, when the war comes between the humans and the robots, you'll be first to fall.
You think that having a map reading skill is going to prevent me falling to the robots? Like, that's where I was going to win, is if only I had been able to read a map, I wouldn't have died in the robot war.
Absolutely. Look at the sky. The sun sets in the west. It rises in the east. Head due west or east, wherever you need to do to get. It's not that hard.
I can't drive east like this. I had to figure out which
find
road
a major
to get
road.
on.
The fucking road signs usually say north, east, west, south on them if it's a state road sign.
I get nervous.
Use your brain. Use your human agency. Don't let the robots make you nervous. Don't let Bill Gates win. Come on. Don't do it. We can't do it.
I mean, yeah, I know,
this
but
is a learning experience for you.
I let everybody. I lost. I got to take the loss on that one. But hey, it was a learning experience because I realized how dependent we are on technology. And so here's the thing, right? To bring it back to this concept, there's so many different things like this where we're incredibly dependent and being molded by the technology we use, by the machines that we as a species have this incredible ability to create such powerful things. And yet those things end up creating so many new problems for us. And individually, they can even ruin people's lives, whether it's like weaponry or like drugs that are synthesized. That's kind of another weird thing, right? Like the ability to synthesize drugs to make them extra powerful and dangerous in that way. That's an ability, like that's a human creation, you know, and that it is kind of a marvel and an achievement that we can create crack, I guess, or whatever. But like, but I mean, it's obviously got some cost. So
yeah. And I have to take a moment right now to admit something, that the machines might have defeated me. It's actually rather cold in Florida right now, and I forgot to turn the heat off before we started recording, and that might have caused a problem with the audio. So look right here. We'll just let it roll because sometimes the machines defeat us.
Yeah, that's
from
right.
our human frailty, and I have to also accept that.
All right.
The only way I can atone for it is by standing outside in the cold and shouting at the sky and saying, "I will not be subdued by your central heating."
That seems like something that the machines would want you to do.
Dude, you never can tell. That's the thing about them.
You can't. You don't know. Anyway, okay, so the humans...
Well, no, not anyway. My question is this. When are we going to get radical and fight back with the machines? This is too much. It's always this, oh, my GPS foiled me, but now I'm just going to keep on doing it. Oh, I spent too much time on social media, but I'm just going to keep on doing it. And everyone just keeps losing. We just keep losing.
Okay, all right. So we're losers. Thank you for clarifying that the robots and the machines have made us losers. I agree. When I use my phone too much, I feel like a goddamn loser. Thanks, phone. But here's the thing. You're right. So how do we harness these things? I think that we're not. I think that we're getting to a weird place also, right? Which is, I feel like I need to know how to code, or I need to know what Web 0.3 is, or whatever 0.3.0 is. I don't even know what version they're all talking about. But I need to keep up. I need to know what Bitcoin is. I need to have them. I need to do all these I need to know what an NFT is. I need to do crypto, you know, all these things. And it's like, I'm just trying to write essays. I'm trying to get out of bed on time. I'm trying to work out every day. I'm trying to cook healthier. I'm still trying to win like the Earth 1.0 version of my life. I'm not prepared to even understand what Web 3.0 is and what I have to do to win it. But here's the thing. We have a lot of these things like the Vidu. What if I said it in Spanish? Do you think that the algorithm picks it up if you say...
Vidu?
the Vidu.
What's a Vidu?
The virus. El virus. Do you think it picks it up in Spanish? Do you think
I have no idea what
do
the
you think the
algorithms
Latinx
do.
are being censored? Are they?
I don't know what the Latinx are doing. I don't think they're into that term. But
They're not.
so
We
okay, the machines have been defeated. I'm making sure the audio is
speak
good.
for the
This is
Latinx.
real time. This is a real time fight between me and the robots. To be fair, the heating system is not actually
Okay, no one
really
wants to hear about this,
automated
so
that
let's
much. Well,
let's
it's
go.
very important.
That's
This
it's
is-
not though. It's important to you and
What
to
are we talking about? Why are we talking about
I wanna
coronavirus?
know.
Did the robots start it? Is that a new conspiracy? Can we start a new
They kind of
conspiracy theory
did
now?
though.
Well, now we're the AI. Did the AI start the coronavirus?
They facilitated the worldwide spread in a way, though, didn't they? Planes and technology enables us to cause mass destruction. And at the same time, some people will say, yes, but it enables us to also massively rescue ourselves from problems, which is true, so like psychiatric medicine is something else that I thought of as a human invention, right? A powerful human creation that is both a bad and a good. Because if you are over medicating your population, we don't even know what that means. We don't even really know what we're doing to ourselves as a population to be able to heavily medicate so many of us with these powerful medications. And in some cases, it's good and great, and you should take your medicine. If you hear voices, definitely pop them pills. But if sometimes you're just sad, maybe, you don't need to be on tons of pills right away. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. As we all know, none of us are experts. None of us know anything. Only CNN does. But what I would like to ask is, what do we do here? How do we deal? It's like we move too fast, right? It's like we're able to create these powerful solutions and these technologies, but before we can actually even think about the possible problems that they may create and then how we would deal with those problems. And you see that in the movie, right? He's able to do this. And one of the questions is, well, why wouldn't you do this? Why wouldn't you do this if you could? Well, maybe because you haven't actually grappled with the potential negatives of that achievement.
So first off, when you say we make these things, we don't make anything. There's
The
an extremely
species,
small
okay?
percent. Yeah, I know, but this is important. There's an extremely small percentage of people that are making things and are scientists and technologists and all that kind of stuff. So there is within the system of experts and scientists and people who make technology, there's potentially a kind of anti-democratic aspect to it because you're the experiment. You're not making anything. You're not creating NFTs, and nobody listening to this is either. All you're doing is getting lost on a highway because your GPS fails all of a sudden. That's not good. And I'm not trying to look. I admit myself, I got all kinds of techno problems. But so we need to talk about that. Also, we're not in control. We're controlled, just like in this film. There's this guy. He's not a likable person that has created this technology. None of the people are likable or particularly good. I mean, in theory, the one guy who gets trapped in the end
He's kind
is
of a
supposedly
loser.
kind of good, but not really.
No, he's not. He
So-
was selfish. He wanted to run off and steal this creation as his girlfriend and be a hero. And it's like, that's what you get for trying to be a fucking hero, okay? Take note. Take note. There's a very interesting element to this movie that blends and blurs the line between who is good, who is bad, who is the villain. And I like that. I like when a movie makes you, like, tricks you by seducing you into using all these stereotypes and like judgments that you might think, well, look, he keeps the robot in a glass cage, he's so evil. Well, the robot was a murderer, so actually that's a pretty nice goddamn prison she had, considering she was like homicidal all along. My take.
Okay, so another aspect of this is that I've just made the claim that there's a very small percentage of people that are actually in control of massive amounts of human beings, which is absolutely the case. But they're also, unfortunately, as all human beings are, not always particularly capable. So this dumbass got stabbed by his own robot. Like, look, I'm not a technologist. I don't know. But how about an off switch? How about instead of all the cameras and stuff, you have an off switch that you hold in your hand like a remote control that we developed in the 1980s? How about that? Or a taser? How about that idea? Do you really need... Yeah, you can create all these systems of surveillance and cameras and all that, but then you forget and you get stabbed by a kitchen knife by a fucking robot. Are you really a genius? Are you really a genius? Are you really a genius, by the way? If, let's say, theoretically, in theory, right, you're working on, I don't know, in a lab trying to look at the potential to, prevent infection from, let's say, viruses in the future for the good of humanity. And then that accidentally gets out and kills a few million people. Are you really a genius? Are you the person... Are you a genius?
No. These are the essential workers, okay? What you are talking about are the essential workers. The true villains are your neighbors who have decided they don't want to put a piece of cloth on their face for 3 years. Those are the enemies. Please do not disrespect the essential workers and or biohacking, international genocide enacting heroes. Okay? Heroes. Don't speak ill. Don't speak ill on this podcast.
I'm speaking in theory. We're not. I'm just talking about
we are just
potentialities.
Lowly fucking plebs with a podcast. I can't even conceive of these ill words of those generous souls is what I would describe the people that may have been engaged in that work purely out of the beauty of their heart. So yes, people make mistakes, let's say.
People do.
And
of all types. Of the lowly peasant type as we are, right. And also of the God scientists that know better. And look, I'm being a little harsh. I'll be a little harsh every now and then. But, I think the more conciliatory message here is that even if you are a expert in some field like AI, right, it is obvious that sometimes human beings make mistakes. Even AI makes mistakes, probably. We don't know yet. Maybe they do. We don't know. We all make mistakes. So how about a little humility? We could rock out to a little humility here and there, and also maybe let's maybe also just consider maybe not manipulating viruses to make them more deadly and then accidentally releasing them across the globe. Let's all just of all party backgrounds, of all political persuasions, of all genders and everyone around the world, grab hands together for one moment and just let's all just say, how about this? How about this plan? Let's have a unifying vision. Maybe we'll ease off on the manipulating viruses to make them more deadly and transmissible in labs, so that in a worst case scenario, and I'm not claiming this has happened because it's never happened before, that virus wouldn't escape the lab. Could we maybe all agree on that? Could we all just agree on that? Maybe just to start, and then
it does seem pretty like a bad idea. I don't know. I'm just a fucking ignorant peasant with a podcast. So my peasant brain can't apparently conceive of risks that apparently were also not conceived of by the people that enacted those risks. But if I put my peasant brain to the test, I don't know, it really seems like a bad idea to do that. Like, why don't you just work with the actual virus as it is? Like, that's fine. We'd be happy with that. Like, those results, that'll work. That'll suffice. Anyway, whatever. So experts are kind of suck. They suck.
Well,
okay?
no,
Not
let's
all
be
of them.
fair.
Not all of them. Not all of them.
They have
Don't tell
mistakes,
me.
like we all have mistakes.
I already know.
Again.
Yeah, well, this is the thing also, right? The mistakes that you make on different levels are have far-reaching consequences. So, I mean, here's the plot of this movie, basically, is this guy made his robot. Great. Good job. You did it because you could. You're so smart. Awesome. Oops, you fucked up. You made one mistake. And now that robot is wandering around the world, just wandering around the world. And we don't know what she's about. And
Well, and here's the thing. So in theory, in this film, right, let's say that the AI escapes and begins to replicate itself. And that in the media in this movie, now there's an AI problem, right? And they say, well, where could this AI have come from? And then someone says, well, there's a guy who has a lab in the mountains somewhere, and he was developing, AI and that working on that a lot. And it seems to be, when we track where this AI was released, it seems to have moved from this lab slowly around other places.
And they call you a right-wing conspiracy theorist and a racist against AI robots. It would be sexist. They'd say that's sexism because the robot is female. Don't.
Yeah,
and Facebook would penalize you. And then a year later, we'd find out. So, breaking news. The AI
breaking
that is
news.
now
The
your
AI
overlord.
lab. Yeah. The AI lab that's named AI Lab might have been, though we're not sure yet, might have been the origin of the release of the AI.
So this is back to the humility, right? This is back to the humility, which is, once again, expert or not, we are all prone to making very severe mistakes, and particularly with the human capacity to mess around with things that are so much bigger than us, and especially in our modern landscape where things can have such far-reaching consequences. Back in the day, if you made a big boo-boo, you killed your town. You killed your village. Maybe you even fucked up your region. But it was a lot harder for things to spread all over the world, to that degree, because it's just the transport and whatever, the time in between, whole different game. Now, even just, the idea of massively destructive weaponry, that's a new thing. Also, that was the scare in the 1950s or whatever, the idea that, oh shit, now the war is not just between country and country. The war could affect the entire world. So as we become more powerful, essentially, our technology does, the mistakes we make are also so much more powerful and far-reaching. And yet, I do not see the development. If anything, I see less humility. And it's a very strange thing. I think I don't know. I really see it with the pandemic and this, believe science. That's terrifying. That's a statement of pure faith, that this idea that this is going to save us. What are you talking about? This is what has caused the problem in many cases. So there's that. But this, there seems to be this human arrogance, and it has a biblical element to it. There's this really old story of the arrogant individual being punished, whether it's by their own hand, by their own folly, finally having to face their own mistakes, or by something larger than them, which is usually in lore or whatever, it's a deity of some kind. But in reality, maybe it's a pandemic, it's something larger than them. So there's that dynamic, and you see this in this movie. You see this in all the kind of the apocalypse movies, whatever. Someone makes a mistake. Oh, Chernobyl, whatever. Here you go. There's a great example of human error, messing around with things that are very powerful and causing serious destruction, and then compounding the destruction because of the inability to kind of rationally deal with our mistakes. Instead, you have all these other things, which is cover it up, or you're not allowed to question that, or you shouldn't be, that's out of your rank, or whatever. All these things that don't match up with our ability to create very powerful, very impactful things. Ooh.
Well, Chernobyl was one aspect of the fall of the Soviet Union. And so it wasn't the only one, but it was that disaster and its cover up was part of the disintegration of an entire country. And so there's a reason why people cover things up. Because if people lose faith in systems too quickly and too fast, things can disintegrate very quickly.
That's true.
All that being said, it's something to consider.
Yeah, it doesn't really help though, right? Because if you go too far in trying to cover things up, it only breeds more suspicion. Like you see that now with the weird, insane, crusade against Rogan's podcast and all the misinformation, fear mongering, that really seems to just compound suspicion towards the institutions and the figures that are trying so hard to get you to be suspicious of anything but them. And it does have this weakening effect. I find myself looking at these figures and these institutions, whether the legacy media or like certain journalists and what have you. And I just see them, it's not even this kind of like sense of rage or anger or mistrust in them. It's just a kind of, I see weakness. It's like you can smell the weakness after a certain point because they really have lost control over the landscape, and the kind of, that kind of doubling down and very like accusatory and admonishing tone only seems like it serves to try to grasp onto a shred of power and to try to misdirect people's focus. It really doesn't work at all. It's such a bad strategy to try to retain any kind of credibility or authority. So, it goes both ways, that like hiding things to retain faith in the system, but also not having enough of that kind of like, hey, no, we don't have everything figured out. I think that would have been, that was a totally different option that could have been taken for dealing with ever evolving information regarding a new virus, which is we're constantly updating this information. So what we're telling you right now is what we know right now, and this is very well subject to change. Not this is what it is now. If you question this, you're banned. If you say anything otherwise, you're a terrible, immoral person. And actually, we just changed that, and quietly sliding to the next thing. You can't do that, man. You can't do that, especially in this landscape now, the media landscape where everything's around for so long.
Power, governance, leadership, implicit in that is something like, well, it is my duty to tell people what's right and what's not. There should have been, in my opinion, some more things have changed. Things have changed more drastically than I think people realize yet. I don't know how far it's going to change, but I actually do believe that it is. Like the amount of distrust, and you can see this in polling, and you can see this if you just talk to other human beings. The amount of distrust in institutions has continued to accelerate. And that's not always good. And that's not always, especially if there's, it would be productive if there was reform afterwards. But I'm not sure if that's what we're heading towards.
No, we're seeing doubling down. It's not, there's that option, right? Which is we're going to change course. Or, better yet would be we admit as, the institution, whatever it is, legacy media, whatever it is, like, there has to be a moment of reckoning. There has to be an acknowledgement of the failure that has caused the distrust in order to mend that and have any chance. You cannot just pretend it didn't exist. That pisses people off so much more than coming out and saying, we messed up the coverage on this. And you saw that there was, I think it was Denmark. I can't remember what the country was, a Nordic country. Their publication some newspaper or something actually ran some story saying that we admit that we mismanaged the coverage of the pandemic. Now, I didn't read the article. I'm just, that's the headline. Maybe the article is like, just kidding. I don't know. But that's actually closer in the right direction, which is you have to acknowledge that failure. You have to do that, or else why would people trust that the next thing you say is in an extension of the same failing strategy? So there's that, but I don't see that. I see a doubling down. I see a demonization too of people that won't let go of the failures that have been accrued and not acknowledged. How dare you continue to hang on to all those failures and bring them up? Like, we're here now. You can't do that. You can't do that. It's disrespectful to people also. It disrespects people's dignity. It disrespects what people can see with their eyes and hear with their ears. And people don't like that. And there's no reason why you should demand trust from people when you tell them to distrust their own eyes and ears constantly and condemn them when they use those, their own senses to make sense of the world.
Well, there's much more that could be said on this. I'm sure that we'll talk about in the future, but I think we should probably move on to
All right,
other
we've got
points.
one little... Do you want to complain about the movie a little bit? Because you've got a few notes here, but we also have that idea of like creators, trying to make you fall in love with things, which is very interesting. So which direction do you want to go in?
I don't want to complain about the movie that much because I don't want to, we base our conversations on this podcast off the movie without always referencing it that much. There were some aspects of it that...
We can do this
It's
at the
not
end.
the movie, actually. It's not the movie itself that I actually... I've seen it before. It's this time period and the aesthetics of this time period that I hate, that I don't like, which is just this technology, everything.
You don't like the
looks,
shiny house.
Yeah, it's I don't like that. I don't like. We've created an ugly world. I don't know why we've done this, but that's a broader topic. We'd have to talk about it in a different.
Well, that's
film,
kind of like that
the,
Bauhaus or whatever type of, what is it, like the communist housing blocks and whatever, when everything just became very industrial for some reason. And there was that movement when it was really ugly. I'm not sure why that happened.
So actually, very briefly, I want to say this. Back to the word of the podcast, there was a very small note at the end of it. And it says, machine for living in, house. Translates Le Corbusier. There was an architect, Le Corbusier. Mm-hmm. It's a French name. Machina habiter, which is machine to live in from the French. So to make a connection back to what we were kind of veering into, there's this idea of creating a world, even architecturally, that is technological and machine and anti-human and cold. Now I don't actually think that's what the architecture is in this film. I'm talking about more just this.
Yeah, that movement.
You know how like every tech logo looks the same?
Yeah.
That's what I don't like. I don't like this world that these people have created. And of course, why should I? Because who's in charge of doing this? I don't like... We've allowed a huge portion of the way we look at the world, because we look at the world through our phone. We've allowed people who code computers for a living, granted they have graphic designers and all that, but we've allowed them to move our culture into a place that's doesn't appeal to me. It just doesn't appeal to me. Maybe it does to other people. I don't know. But
I know what you mean.
In terms of this, and in terms of this film, there's also this soundtrack of this kind of moody, like instrumental, I call it shoegazing music, that is just all part of this kind of feeling on my part of this general dehumanizing kind of like you're just a sedated robot, just sit there and stare at glass all day. I just hate it. I hate it. I have contempt for it. I don't want to live in that world. I have contempt for it. Complete contempt.
I respect that contempt.
Yeah, and in this film, I'm not blaming this film because it is trying to it's not actually a judgment on this film. It's using this
yeah, that aesthetic, yeah.
right, to make points. Now, the other thing they do, and one last thing, there's this kind of Terrence Malick move. Terrence Malick is a director where, and I've seen this seep into commercials for tech. It's this very specific type of thing. It's like a person of like mediocre beauty standing in a wheat field with kind of the sun coming down and like making these little like spots on the screen, and everything's kind of quiet, but then there's that shoegazing drone music going on in the background, and it's like, and it'll be like, Apple is totally great. And it's like, no, God, no, you're just, and they do that a few times. Now, the Terrence Malick move earlier, this is for the cinemaphiles, he would, and he still does this, he'll have these quiet moments of like, of usually it's humans and nature together. But I digress on this one. I'm just saying that there's a lot to this world that has existed for the last 15 years or so that I reject, I have contempt for, and I do not like. But that's just me,
Well, look,
I'm an aging man defeated by his air conditioner. So,
yeah, well, okay. This is where the trad movement takes up its its battle cry, because there is this there's a little bit of a growing ethos that is, somewhat inspired by that contempt that you describe for this kind of dehumanized, sanitized aesthetic. I think there was a brief moment, right, where maybe that futuristic, minimalistic, clean, whatever, aesthetic had some type of hope in it. The same kind of hope that we see in like going to space once upon a time. This thing that the future will be cleaner, the future will be simpler, the future will just like fall into place in such a more simple way. That's how the design looks. But actually, it's been dehumanized and anonymized in a way, right? Because here's the interesting thing is that all glass is relatively the same. When you have a building that's built, once upon a time with bricks, where people there was this artisan element to the construction of the materials and the putting the materials together. There was so much more of this human impact and interaction with what was constructed. I don't think, I'm not an expert on construction. I can't, speak to whether glass has an artisan touch to it, but I don't see that same quality when I look at a lot of the downtown buildings that are they're all wall-to-ceiling glass. I think part of it is just economics, actually. I think it's probably cheaper to do that, which is, something definitely worth questioning when you think of, aren't we so much more wealthy as a people, as a society, than the people and the societies that we still visit their locations that they've built these old buildings, because we marvel at the intricacy and the design of these far older buildings that were made in a time when people had far less. Even if you were the king, you were still less wealthy than a lot of like software designers today or something, depending on which king, of course. So I have that same sense. I think that there is, and there's a return a little bit to this desire to have more human feeling surroundings. I'm sure that we might even find something in the future which is like, oh, actually, too much glass in your surroundings makes you depressed, or whatever, something like that, like where we find there was an intuitive relationship between wood interiors or whatever, something like that.
So, two things. One of the things viewers may recognize is I have a bunch of weird paintings surrounding me, which I make. These paintings are a kind of fusion between this digital thing, but then I use very analog methods and acrylic paint, and I purposely take what it looks like it should be pixels and slightly offset them from one another. But that's another thing. I'm not an expert on architecture, but I don't care. I have a podcast, so I can just say whatever I want. You can label it misinformation. There's a it doesn't matter anymore.
Architecture misinformation.
Yeah, I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's okay. It's okay not to listen to me either. I'm wrong about things. So you look at these buildings, first, partially, I think there's a aspect of you need to put more people inside a smaller space. So you can't build brick cathedrals to house the Verizon customer service team in, Maybe you could, but it wouldn't be very economically efficient. Maybe I would prefer it, but, I imagine there are people in Verizon who's like, yeah, we don't want to build a cathedral for the customer reps for our company. Glass also, these big skyscraper glass buildings, if I'm not mistaken, it seems like there's always glare. You can't see what's happening inside of them, right? Like, so there's this. It's a big subject. I don't want to get into it too much. It's a big subject, but I don't think, we've just created a world which is dehumanizing and devastating to the human spirit. I'm pretty sure in almost everything we've done. I mean, I look at the phone. It makes sense
though. Yeah, because I think that there's a lot of this anti-human ethos in things because I think humans fundamentally dislike themselves. And I think that there is like this Puritan, self-loathing spirit that comes out in everything we do. It seems like, because we don't do penance somewhere else anymore. Instead, we just create an ugly world that makes us do penance as we go about our day. I don't know.
No, because again, we make this mistake of like, we're not in charge. Me and you are not in charge. Just like we're not in charge of designing the logo for Facebook. The people that are in charge of creating these gigantic, the Bank of America buildings in the middle of cities, they're the ones that are doing it. And I assume they're doing it because of, rational reasons. They're like, yeah, this is cheap. This is a way we can build a thing, put a lot of people in it, and it's safe and whatever it is.
We've really allowed the people that have the least, not to call them inhuman, but I mean, they're not exactly the most in touch with the human experience in some way. Like, it really astounds me that of all the people that have the most power to manipulate how humans are communicating and interacting, it's people like Mark Zuckerberg. Like, I don't trust him to dictate how we interact, because I don't think he looks like he knows how to interact. He's kind of weird, okay? So it's just like, of all the people to have that much control over how humans experience their interactions with each other, it doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem wise, okay? So that's what I'm not into. So look, we got about 10 minutes here, so we can either rock it out. Let's rock it out really quick, because I hate to say we're going to talk about this and then psych the viewers out at the end. So briefly, we're talking about Facebook, right? So here's the thing. And there is this sick ethos with a lot of things that this tech people make, right? They want you to love it. This is your new coffee mug. It's going to go with you everywhere. It's your friend when you're feeling down, when you're feeling up, when you're not feeling anything at all. It's there. It's always there, just like we are. We love you. It's a Subaru. Like, what the fuck? Stop. It's creepy. Why do these companies take this approach of like, we care? And you get these messages now on Facebook. They're like, did you not like that post, friend? Did that hurt your feelings? We care. Let us know. Ew. This stop. Like, there needs to be boundaries between me and my friends, my family, and my technology. That is also something that I would like to have healthy boundaries with. I don't need Facebook sending me messages, are you feeling upset today? That's what I have a therapist for, and there's confidentiality in that relationship. So don't ask me these personal questions. But this begs the question also, it's like, what are they trying to do? What's going on here? Because in the movie, we see this designer of the robot literally is trying to test the efficacy of his design by seeing whether he can get a human being to fall in love with it. That's the biggest test. And it's a great idea. It is a good test, right? Because yeah, that would be the most well-designed technology, is something that a human feels a human connection to, even though it's not human.
So, number one, I stopped using Facebook several years ago because it sucks.
It's weird.
So that's number one, right? I mean, who does this? No one's even using that. Do people use it still?
They
if you're
should stop.
under like 60 years old, it's fine. They can do that. They own everything else, so it's fine too.
Yeah, that's true.
So I want to say this. Facebook, and this has come out, and people can check this to make sure I'm not spreading disinformation. Several years ago, Facebook ran experiments on their users. They purposely, they took a group of people and they purposely manipulated their timeline to show them imagery that they thought would make them feel depressed and sad. You can look it up right now if you want. Yeah, no, they did this.
I'll look it up.
So this
for the
isn't
sake.
this isn't a conspiracy theory or speculation. Just look it up, motherfuckers, if you're wondering. So you're asking this question, why are they doing this? Well, stop asking this question. You're a subject. You're a fucking lab rat. Why do you think that you're not a lab rat? When you're using a product created by a billion-dollar multinational corporation, and you're like, well, do they love me? No, motherfucker, they don't love you. you're an experiment to some degree. Now you're also a consumer, and so they have to, they have to present themselves to you in a way in which you will tolerate them. But have you checked this misinformation I'm spreading?
No, you're correct. Yeah, they
That's
ran
right.
essentially what is an experiment, which to my knowledge, it's very tricky, right? Because if you run an actual experiment, you have to do a lot of hoop jumping for ethical reasons. But because it's a company experimenting on its consumers, it seems that they may be able to get around that. But this is a very, this is the thing about these companies, is there's so much gray area. But essentially that's what it is. They did both. They tweaked people's experience on Facebook to see if they could produce both positive and negative emotional states through the usage of the product, which is
So
can you imagine, like, you're using a product and the company that you are using that product is like, let's see if we can make this person have a terrible day. Like, that seems blatantly unethical to me, but I can see how it's also very gray in deciding how you would ever actually do anything about that lack of ethics, besides as an individual saying peace out.
Peace out. So the other thing I will bring up, something in the news recently that does play into this general conversation in the movie. If you like, feel free to look it up. You can use the power of technology to look it up while we speak. Something called the nudge unit in the UK, United Kingdom. The nudge unit.
I'm not going to look it up.
Yeah. So this was created, I think, around 2010, and it uses. This is within the government of the United Kingdom. This sounds like conspiracies, but I suggest everyone go take a look. It uses behavioral science to influence the citizens of the country to make good decisions. That's what it does. Okay?
Oh.
Now, recently, I believe that somebody came out that was either a part of this or people can look up for themselves, and said, during the pandemic, we purposely incited fear in the population in order to make them behave in a safer way. And that's fine. Look, let's just say what is there and talk about it.
But they said it out loud. That is always the part that gets me, is like, but you just said it out loud instead of doing it secretly behind closed doors and denying it like normal tyrants and insane people.
Well, until they got caught. But I mean, but caught is a weird word because there's a website. Just go to read their website. And look, these people think that they're doing, and probably are to some degree.
Almost everyone does think that they're doing something for the greater good. I mean, like, even
so they were like, well, hey, and this particular thing in the government in the UK has had programs before, and they say, look, we've done these, we've used what is in essence propaganda to move the population to make better decisions that are better for them.
And that's not new, right? Because we would even, I bet if you ran some kind of poll, you could ask people like, would you think it's fine for the government to use this type of propaganda-esque informational campaign to get people to litter less, to get people to eat healthier? And I bet you'd get quite a hefty number, definitely over half, that would say yes. And
okay, but I say no. Number one, I say no completely.
I know. That's what I was going to say.
No more compromise. No more compromise with this shit. No more. I don't.
No.
It's not no. I need to say this. First off, also, the robots will not win. Also, if the government had a campaign, it was an anti-littering campaign. I'm not for littering. And they said, don't litter because it's not good or whatever. And I was like, okay, fine. Yeah, spend some money on that. It's good. It keeps things clean. If they said, don't litter because if you do, you're likely to die. Then I'd say, well, okay. I mean, maybe that's not an acceptable approach. Maybe inspiring fear in people, even if you think it's for the good, maybe that has some problems. And not only does it have some ethical problems, you know what it also may have? It has some consequences afterwards that you can't predict. That's the problem. That's the problem with all this. Just like the Nathan in the movie, he didn't predict, his algorithms didn't work, that he was going to get stuck with a bread knife by his fucking sex robot. He didn't look out into the future enough to figure that out. And so all I'm suggesting, again, to come back to this theme, which has been my theme throughout this podcast, is I reject robots. And I reject propaganda used to control people through fear. I don't think that's good, because even if the outcome is good, then that's not...
No, because it uses people. Deception, okay? So it's like, it's one of these things that, what is it? Like, there's some biblical thing of like the tools you use or something. I don't know what the thing is. Like, you reap what you sow, etc. So when
Bible expert, Salome Saipone.
the Bible, reap what you sow. I think the Bible actually does. Like, that is what comes from the Bible, though. But the problem with these things is that, like, yeah, exactly. I can immediately see the unintended or, accidental side effects of something like using fear to reach a goal that, although the goal might be benevolent, well, here's the thing. The fear is not only going to be located in that one aspect of the person when they're thinking about littering or when they're thinking about whether to put a mask on or whatever it is. The fear permeates the entire being. So now that person goes home and is still infected by that fear that's meant to bring them to this good goal, but now they're interacting with their family members from a place of whatever that fear is that's been stoked in them for this greater good. Now they're going around in their daily interactions with other people with harboring that same sense of fear. And it's like, well, let's see, maybe we would have an agitated, aggressive population if everybody's in a state of low-grade fear all the time. Oh, but at least they're making safe decisions for themselves, which may also include mistreating other people and becoming more authoritarian and, extreme in their views, because that's what fear tends to breed. So it's right there. You can have this. It's that arrogance, right? That kind of like, I don't know, this idea that we as humans, like, just because we can do something, that we'll be able to do it well, and that we should do that. And there's a real lack of capacity or humility, whatever it is, in grappling with the fact that you're very likely to fuck up what you're doing anyway. And if you're fucking something up, at that scale where you're actually controlling mass amounts of people, those consequences can be extremely devastating, and it's not worth it. But it's also, one last point on that, we're getting to a point where this is a problem that was not as much of a problem before, because the ability to reach into individuals' lives on a mass scale and have such a kind of centralized influence over an entire population of hundreds of millions of people, that's unprecedented. So at the same time, this desire to control and influence people, even if through using deceptive modes, just because you think it's going to get you to a positive goal, we're doing this on a scale that's unprecedented. And that's already, in my book, more than enough to rescind that and to let people, affect their own consequences is the safer route. And also the more respectful route. It's less dehumanizing.
So I'll close with saying two more things about this, and then I'll be done. Remember, the motto of Facebook was "Move fast and break things."
Oh, yeah.
Remember that was their model, their little motto they had at their company headquarters. And again, like it's this. It's
so dystopian.
These company headquarters of these tech places. You have it in your mind, right? It's all these nerds sitting around like playing ping pong, and like they live in an ugly building, but also it's kind of like it's kind of childlike because they have like toys around them and stuff.
Yeah.
Gross. I don't want any. No, these people don't need to be in charge. They can make computer games and stuff or whatever it is. You can't do experiments though on people that using your apps anymore. You shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, well, the problem is, yeah, okay, go on.
Well, there is no problem because I don't want to use
you
their
have to
stuff.
not use the apps also. That's the thing. It's getting, it's
hard.
Well, because
last month I was off Instagram. I said I'm going to do a handstand, a yoga handstand, or not be on Instagram. I very rarely, I would go on there to see if you would put something up, and then I would disseminate it out on my massive platform.
I have to promote the podcast. How do I, so great. I go work for, some shitty corporation, whatever. What am I going to do? Get a contract with Sony so I can put out the Silver Eye Society or some shit? Like, so it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. But this peasant brain, when it figures out Web 3.0, then we'll see. The future is decentralized, bitches, or so I've been told.
So you've been told. Here's the other last thing, and the problem with all this. Going back to this idea of the nudge unit and behavioral science, using behavioral science to manipulate mass populations, because that's what it is. And by the way, of course, there's some corollary in the United States government. I don't know what it is. If the UK is doing it, the United States is already doing it 10 times as much, because we used to be your colony and now we're not. But anyway, so here's the problem. One of the ways they would do this is they use modeling data during the pandemic. This is a terrible thing. And maybe it doesn't matter because most people just don't know it, so it won't actually matter. It matters to me, though. So I think it was Imperial College or something like that would run these models. Now, the modeling data for things like when the most recent variant came out, there's a huge range of potential infection and fatalities going from low to high. Because and I'm not a scientist, and I'm not I don't do statistics. I'm just a humble peasant on the internet. Again, just a peasant. I don't know. But your model fucking kind of sucks because you have like, hey, I can make guesses too. Like if you're like, make a guess between 1 and 10, and I just pick a random number, and I'm like, but it still wins because all I need to do is pick between 1 and 10. It was somewhere in there. It's bad. But here's the problem. So that didn't totally make sense, but here's the problem. So I'm not going to trust these. Let's just say it. Climate change is a thing. We talked about it in Don't Look Up or whatever the fuck that was called.
Yeah.
It uses modeling data.
Yeah.
The modeling data for the pandemic, these people specifically said, we always emphasize the worst possible outcomes because that's how we get people to act. Well, now when I'm presented with modeling data about issues of climate change, what am I supposed to do? Because I already know that that in this particular case, the government had a plan. They decided, look, we think this is best for everybody, and so we're going to use science and modeling data, and then we're not just going to use it, we're going to then, to some degree, weaponize it against our own population to make them do the thing which we think is best for them. And I get that part. I'm not trying to say that they're evil or something because of that, because I think that they believe that they should scare people in order for their own good. But now, me as a reasonable peasant out here on my peasant podcast, when I see this in the future, what do you want me to think? And what's the consequence of that? Because
here's the problem.
Could be important at some
you
point.
Found the secret. The peasants aren't supposed to have this kind of knowledge. This is why they're supposed to be, there's this push against all misinformation and any type of alternate media, new media is condemned because ideally you don't know that the model is always the most extreme version. So when they tell you the world's going to end in 12 years, you lap it up and you say, I heard it on CNN and they tell me the truth. And there is no way I could know that they don't because who else is telling me anything?
But it's not, and it wouldn't be a lie. That's the thing. Because to clarify something, they use the modeling is so wide ranging and often because, hey, guess what? You know what? It's real hard to predict the future. Here's a news flash for everybody. It's really difficult to predict the future. And as time moves forward, it becomes more and more difficult to predict the future. So fair enough. Your models have a big spread between the minimum and the maximum. But then you take the maximum, the most scary outcome, and then that's the headline. And it works so well, doesn't it? Because the media, of course, has, if they can scare you, then they get you to click.
Yeah, they get their part from that whole dynamic too. Right.
So there's a lot of interlocking potential issues here that we have.
Yeah, there's a lot of vested interest in scaring the shit out of everybody, as we've seen continually. I mean, we could talk about that for a while.
That's the thing. None of this requires like a conspiracy. None of this requires evil actors of particular, of villains of this kind of thing. It's really not that. Potentially, it's not that complicated. It's like the human story, which is people thought they were doing something good, and they decided to put it on huge populations and roll the dice and see if it worked out. I'm worried that, I will never use GPS again. Goodbye.
I don't have that option. I mean,
it's enough. Okay. The robots must be defeated.
Yeah, the robots must be defeated, man, because the robot that I keep in my purse is that's the real tyrant. Forget the government. That thing has me on a leash. I don't like it. So I don't know. This is okay. To sum the podcast, what should we do at the end? We should tell people what to do or something. People like to be told what to do. It's better you listen to us.
No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to tell people what to do.
But we
I will
tell
say
them,
that. Okay,
I'll command them and moralize them. We just say, hey, here's an option. Here's an option. Don't live in fear. That's my suggestion.
Okay, can I have my suggestion? I'm going to tell you my suggestion. When someone starts a sentence, or when someone uses the command form of believe at you, become skeptical. Yeah. So when someone says believe and it's a verb and it is a command form of the verb, which is you believe X, whatever it may be, just take a moment to step back and say, why are you doing that? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Not believe verb, believe noun.
Yeah, well, believe can be a verb. Do you understand?
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood your...
So believe the science. Do you understand that,
exactly.
that word
That's
right
what
there?
I'm trying to...
The word... Okay, so yeah.
Believe is the verb, yeah.
Yes, it's the command form of the verb. So, yes. I believe, you believe.
Do not be
you want
commanded.
to do a fucking grammar lesson?
Do not be commanded. This is already something that I would say. Don't be commanded. How dare anybody command anyone? This is so, what is this? The monarchy times? Like, I don't like it. I see a lot of peasant energy, like big peasant energy. People want to be told what to do. People want to, side with like the king and shit. Blah, like get your fucking pitchforks and point them in the right direction. But also, don't get your pitchfork and go to your beautiful pastoral village and live in peace. Enjoy your cows. Watch the episode we did on lamb. Think about the lambs. Have some peace. Go sit down with your family. Watch the episode we did on Don't Look Up. Sit down with your family during the end of the world and enjoy it. God, it's not that hard. That's all you gotta do. Just sit through the apocalypse and smile. I mean, honestly, though, that's the thing. Just kind of like, don't be commanded and don't be fearful.
I'm trying to say that if you're commanded, ask the question, why is the person commanding me? Sometimes you need to be commanded. There's a reason to be like, you're not an expert on everything, neither am I.
That's true.
You're not a doctor, and neither am I. I am not a robot scientist. I have never been a robot scientist, and I never will be. But so there are people with expertise. There are people that know things you don't know. We shouldn't lose sight of that. I'm simply saying, when someone commands you to do something, ask the question, ask the question, be skeptical behind the question. That's all. That's all I'm trying to say. And fight the robots.
Yes, I agree. And subscribe to this podcast, like and subscribe.
And that.
Follow us on social media if you aren't already. Join the Patreon because it allows us to be not subject to Sony Music conglomerate or Facebook censorship and Twitter et al. All of these things. Your contributions to us allow us to be free of the system so that we can keep speaking
Well, not really.
honestly.
Patreon can fuck us too. I
Well,
shouldn't have interrupted the advertisement, but let's be fair.
No,
Patreon could totally fuck us also.
It's true. Patreon could absolutely fuck us. They might. They have in the past fucked other people. But I'm working on that, okay? But we need to build up
Web
some kind of a
3.0.
base. Gotta build up some kind of a base so we can shift the Silver Eye Society members to Web 3.0. So join us for your future.